A narcissist's power hinges on one crucial element, their ability to control your emotional responses. It's not physical power, it's not even intellectual power. It's the capacity to shape your inner world, to make you doubt yourself, question your reality, and become emotionally entangled in their narrative. When you walk away, you strip them of that power in an instant. You remove the very thing they depend on to sustain their sense of dominance. And this loss is far more devastating to them than you might realize. You see, a narcissist is fundamentally insecure. Beneath the grandiosity, the manipulation, and the apparent confidence lies a fragile self-image, one that constantly requires external validation to stay intact. They cannot tolerate emotional ambiguity. They need to know they can affect you because it confirms their importance. If they can make you angry, they matter. If they can make you feel guilty, they have control. And if they can keep you confused, they can keep you trapped. But the moment you walk away, you break this cycle. You communicate in the most profound way possible that they no longer have any influence over how you feel or how you see yourself. It's worth asking, why do narcissists invest so much effort into controlling others' emotions in the first place? The answer lies in their psychological structure. Narcissists lack a stable sense of self. Most people, when faced with emotional distress, can turn inward, drawing strength from their values, their relationships, and their ability to reflect honestly. But the narcissist cannot do this. Their inner world is hollow. So instead of working on themselves, they attempt to regulate their emotions by controlling those around them. Your emotional turmoil becomes their form of self-soothing. This is why they provoke, gaslight, and manipulate. They need your emotional reactions to affirm their sense of power. When you walk away, you deny them this lifeline. You refuse to be the emotional puppet they rely on. And this refusal strikes at the heart of their deepest fear, irrelevance. Because at their core, narcissists are terrified of being insignificant. If you no longer react to them, if your mood is no longer shaped by their actions, it forces them to confront a reality they have spent their entire lives avoiding, that their power is an illusion. It's not real. It only exists if you allow it to. But walking away does something even more profound. It forces you to reclaim your emotional autonomy. When you are entangled with a narcissist, your emotional state becomes intertwined with theirs. You find yourself reacting to their moods, their provocations, their shifting narratives. You are no longer free in the truest sense because your emotional well-being depends on someone else's behavior. Walking away severs that bond. It gives you back control over how you feel and how you respond. It allows you to step outside their emotional chaos and rediscover a sense of internal stability. And it's not an easy thing to do. Narcissists are masters at making you feel responsible for their emotions. They will convince you that leaving is an act of betrayal, that you are abandoning them, that you are heartless for walking away. This is a trap. It's an attempt to reel you back in through guilt and obligation. But the truth is this: you are not responsible for regulating anyone else's emotions, especially not someone who refuses to take accountability for their own life. Walking away is not cruel. It is an act of self-preservation. It is a declaration that your emotional health matters and that you will no longer sacrifice your well-being to keep someone else comfortable. This is where the true power shift occurs. Once you walk away, the narcissist is left with nothing to hold on to. Their manipulations lose their sting. Their provocations fall flat. And without your emotional reactions feeding their ego, they are left to confront the emptiness within themselves. This is why narcissists panic when you walk away. It's not just about losing control over you, it's about losing control over the one thing that keeps their fragile identity intact. And here's something else to consider. When you walk away, you redefine the entire dynamic. You are no longer the victim of their manipulations. You are no longer caught in their web of control. You become the one who sets the terms. This reversal is shattering to a narcissist ego because they cannot function in a world where they are not in charge. And the more firmly you hold your ground, the more powerless they become. But the power of walking away extends beyond the narcissist. It transforms you. It is a profound act of self-respect. It is a declaration that your emotions are yours to govern, that no one has the right to manipulate your inner world without your consent. And when you make that decision, you take back everything they tried to steal from you. Your peace of mind, your sense of self, and your emotional freedom. So, when faced with a narcissist who seeks to control your emotions, remember this: the most powerful thing you can do is walk away, not in anger, not in spite, but with the quiet confidence that their power over you only exists if you grant it to them. And the moment you decide to reclaim your emotional autonomy, their control collapses. Because in the end, no one can truly control you unless you allow it. One of the most profound effects of walking away from a narcissist is that it dismantles the illusion of their superiority. At the core of narcissistic behavior is a relentless need to feel special above others, untouchable and unquestionably dominant. This belief in their own superiority is not just an attitude, it is the very foundation of their psychological identity. Without it, their carefully constructed sense of self begins to crumble. When you walk away, you deliver a powerful, unspoken message. They are not as indispensable or all-powerful as they believe themselves to be. And nothing is more destabilizing to a narcissist than the realization that they are, in fact, ordinary and worse, expendable. To understand why this shatters their sense of superiority, you have to grasp how deeply this belief is woven into their psyche. For most people, self-worth is rooted in an internal sense of value, a recognition of one's strengths and limitations, balanced by an ability to engage meaningfully with the world. But for a narcissist, this internal foundation is absent. They rely on external validation to maintain the illusion of their exceptionalism. Their perceived superiority is not a quiet, earned confidence. It is a fragile facade that must be reinforced constantly. This is why they engage in manipulation, gaslighting, and power plays. It is not simply to dominate others. It is to avoid the unbearable realization that without this superiority, they are nothing. When you remain in their orbit, you play a crucial role in upholding this illusion. Every time you tolerate their manipulation, every time you bend to their will, you confirm their belief that they are in control, that they are special, untouchable, and deserving of deference. Your compliance feeds their ego, providing the external reinforcement they need to maintain their inflated self-position. But the moment you walk away, you sever this supply. You withdraw the very thing that props up their fragile sense of superiority. And this, to a narcissist, is intolerable. Walking away is an act of defiance. It contradicts the core of their identity. You are supposed to need them. You are supposed to revolve around their desires, their moods, their agenda. When you leave, you break that narrative. You prove concretely and irrevocably that their power over you is not absolute. And the more indifferent you are as you walk away, the more devastating the blow. Because if they were truly superior, if they were as irreplaceable as they believe, why would you leave? This contradiction creates a psychological crisis for the narcissist. They cannot accept that you have the autonomy to walk away without it reflecting on their worth. To them, your departure is not simply an inconvenience, it is a threat to their entire worldview. It forces them to confront questions they spend their lives avoiding. What if I'm not special? What if I'm not in control? What if I'm not as important as I believe? These questions, left unanswered, chip away at their carefully constructed illusion. And it is precisely because these questions are so threatening that the narcissist will do everything in their power to prevent you from leaving. They will employ guilt, manipulation, and even charm to keep you entangled. But it's not because they value you as a person. It's because they cannot bear the psychological collapse that your departure triggers. You walking away is a mirror reflecting their deepest fear that their superiority is a lie. And without someone there to reinforce the illusion, they are left to face the emptiness they've been avoiding their entire lives. But here is where you reclaim your own power. When you walk away, you redefine the narrative. You refuse to participate in the illusion that the narcissist is superior. You assert that your worth is not contingent on their approval or their manipulations, and in doing so, you liberate yourself from the psychological grip they once held over you. You cease to be a pawn in their game, and you reclaim the ability to define your own reality on your own terms. More importantly, you set a boundary that cannot be manipulated. Narcissists thrive on exploiting blurred lines, on pushing limits and testing how far they can go before you break. But walking away is the ultimate boundary. It is clear, absolute, and undeniable. And this kind of boundary is something a narcissist cannot easily overcome. It signals that their games no longer work, that their power no longer holds sway, and that you are no longer willing to be controlled by their distorted sense of reality. And here is the truth they cannot escape. If their superiority were real, if their power over you were as absolute as they believe, you would never have had the strength to walk away in the first place. Your departure is living proof that they are not as untouchable as they need to believe. And nothing, absolutely nothing, undermines a narcissist's sense of superiority more than that. So when you find yourself entangled with someone who thrives on making you feel small, remember this. Your greatest power lies in your ability to leave, not with anger, not with a need to prove anything, but with the quiet, unshakable certainty that their superiority only exists if you allow it to. And the moment you walk away, that illusion collapses. Because in the end, no one, not even a narcissist, can control you unless you let them. Another profound way that walking away strips a narcissist of their power is by dismantling their ability to control your emotional responses. Narcissists thrive on eliciting strong emotions, whether it's admiration, guilt, fear, or even anger. Because these emotions tether you to their world. The more emotionally invested you are, the easier it is for them to manipulate your thoughts and actions. But when you walk away, you sever this emotional feedback loop, and in doing so, you deliver a blow to the very foundation of their control. To understand why this is so devastating to a narcissist, you need to appreciate how central emotional manipulation is to their strategy. Narcissists are not interested in genuine emotional connection. They do not engage with others on equal reciprocal terms. Instead, they view relationships as transactional, an opportunity to extract something they need. And one of the most valuable resources you provide is emotional energy. Every time you react, whether positively or negatively, you feed their sense of control. It confirms their ability to provoke a response, to occupy your mental and emotional space, to dictate the terms of engagement. This is why narcissists often push buttons deliberately. They are masters at identifying your vulnerabilities, your insecurities, your fears, your deepest desires, and using them to pull you into a state of emotional reactivity. If they can make you feel guilty, they can keep you tethered to their demands. If they can provoke anger, they know you're still emotionally hooked. Even your resistance, paradoxically, serves their agenda. Because as long as you are reacting, they remain the central figure in your psychological landscape. But the moment you walk away, the game changes. You signal unmistakably that their ability to influence your emotional world is over. And this is where the true panic sets in for the narcissist, because without your emotional engagement, their sense of power begins to disintegrate. It is not enough for a narcissist to be in your life. They need to occupy your mind. They need to know that their words can still sting, that their absence can still haunt, that their presence still carries weight. When you walk away, especially if you do so with emotional detachment, you rob them of this power. You demonstrate that their capacity to affect you has diminished, and for a narcissist, this is an intolerable reality. The reason this cuts so deeply is that beneath their grandiosity, most narcissists carry a profound fear of insignificance. The facade of superiority masks a fragile, often deeply wounded core, a core that is terrified of being irrelevant. Emotional control is the means by which they stave off this terrifying prospect. If they can keep you emotionally engaged, they can maintain the illusion that they matter, but when you withdraw that engagement, you force them to confront the very thing they fear most, their own powerlessness. And make no mistake, this realization does not emerge gently. It is a psychological crisis for the narcissist. They cannot simply accept that you have moved on without it striking at the heart of their identity. Because to acknowledge that they no longer have emotional power over you is to confront the possibility that they are not as omnipotent as they believe. And this realization, if left unchecked, can unravel the very framework of their self-concept. That's why when you walk away, many narcissists will escalate their tactics. They will seek new ways to provoke a response. They may lash out with insults, attempt to guilt trip you, or even shift to charm and false remorse, all designed to draw you back into the emotional dynamic. But it is not because they care about you. it is because they cannot tolerate the loss of control your departure represents. And this is precisely where your power lies. Every time you refuse to engage, every time you decline to respond to their provocations, you reinforce the reality that their ability to manipulate you is broken. You are no longer feeding their ego. You are no longer providing the emotional sustenance they require. And in this absence, they are left to confront their own emptiness. It's important to recognize, too, that your emotional detachment does not mean you lack compassion. In fact, true compassion often requires boundaries. It is neither kind nor wise to allow someone to perpetuate harm in the name of understanding their pain. Walking away is not just an act of self-preservation, it is an act of truth. It communicates clearly and unequivocally that their attempts to control you emotionally will no longer succeed. And the longer you maintain this distance, the deeper the impact. The narcissist is left to grapple with the reality they cannot easily escape. Their power was never inherent. It only existed because you allowed it. Without your emotional engagement, their influence collapses. This is why walking away is so devastating. It reveals the truth they work so tirelessly to avoid, that without an audience, their performance ceases to matter. And that's a lesson worth remembering. No one, no matter how manipulative or controlling, can occupy your emotional world without your consent. Your attention, your energy, your emotional responses are yours to give. And when you choose to withdraw them, you reclaim a power no narcissist can take away. Because in the end, the most profound act of freedom is to walk away and mean it. Another deeply unsettling consequence for a narcissist when you walk away is the sudden loss of control over the narrative. Narcissists are not merely concerned with how they appear to you, they are profoundly invested in controlling how the world perceives them. Their self-commission is not built on a foundation of genuine self-worth, but on a carefully crafted illusion designed to elicit admiration, fear, or dependence. When you walk away, especially without allowing them to dictate the terms, you disrupt this carefully maintained illusion and challenge their ability to shape reality itself. At the core of narcissistic behavior is an obsessive need to manage perception. This is why they engage in manipulation, gaslighting, blame shifting, and rewriting history. Because if they can control the story, they can control how they are viewed. And as long as you remain within their sphere of influence, they have the ability to shape how you interpret reality. They can recast their cruelty as tough love, their selfishness as strength, and their emotional manipulation as concern. But the moment you walk away, they lose the ability to spin that narrative in real time. And this loss is not trivial. It strikes at the heart of their defensive structure. When you are no longer present to validate their version of events, the narcissist faces a profound threat, the possibility that others will begin to see through the facade. Narcissists depend on external validation to maintain their fragile self-image. It is not enough for them to feel superior. They need others to reflect that superiority back to them. This is why they react so aggressively when their narrative is challenged. Your departure creates a vacuum in which their version of reality becomes vulnerable to question. And the more independent and self-assured your exit, the greater the threat you pose to the stories they tell. Consider the psychological mechanism at play here. For the narcissist, the world is not an objective reality, it is a stage. Every relationship, every interaction, every moment is an opportunity to reinforce their preferred identity. When you remain close, you are part of that stage play. You serve as an actor who affirms their central role. But when you walk away, you signal, perhaps for the first time, that you are no longer willing to play along. You refuse to be a character in their production. And for a narcissist, this is intolerable. It is not simply rejection. It is a rupture in the narrative control that underpins their entire sense of self. The panic this induces is not merely emotional, it is existential. Without the ability to control how you view them and how others interpret your experience, the narcissist is left exposed. They may respond by launching a smear campaign, attempting to discredit you to mutual acquaintances. This isn't because they genuinely believe the lies they tell, it is a desperate attempt to reclaim control over the narrative. If they can convince others that you are unstable or disloyal, they believe they can erase the threat your departure represents. But here's the crucial truth. These reactive behaviors are not signs of power. They are symptoms of fear. When you walk away without engaging in their narrative warfare, you strip them of the ability to shape how their actions are perceived. And the longer you remain silent, the more the narcissist is left alone with the reality they have worked so hard to deny, that their power only existed because you allowed it. This is a deeply destabilizing realization for someone whose identity is predicated on maintaining control. But there's another dimension to this that is worth understanding. When you refuse to engage with the narcissist version of events, you do more than protect yourself. You invalidate their power over others. Narcissists thrive in environments where their manipulation goes unchallenged. When you walk away and live well, when you refuse to play the part they have assigned you, you become living proof that their control is not absolute. This is why they work so hard to draw you back. Your freedom represents a direct contradiction to the story they tell about themselves. And perhaps the most profound truth of all is this: you cannot control how a narcissist spins the story, but you can control whether or not you participate. The greatest leverage they have is your emotional investment. Every time you react, every time you defend yourself, every time you engage, you give them an opportunity to rewrite the script. But when you disengage, when you leave and refuse to return, you cut off their ability to shape your reality. And over time, that absence becomes louder than any words they can speak. What you must remember is that truth, by its nature, is resilient. While a narcissist may succeed in distorting the narrative temporarily, the reality of who they are will always reveal itself in the end. Their lies cannot sustain themselves indefinitely. And the more you embody your own truth, the less their manipulations matter. Walking away isn't just an act of self-liberation, it's an act of narrative defiance. It says with unmistakable clarity, I will no longer be defined by your version of reality. And in the end, that is the move that breaks their power entirely. Because no matter how loudly they protest or how fiercely they try to pull you back, they cannot control a story you refuse to participate in. And that, your refusal to play the game, is the one thing they fear most. One of the most profound ways walking away strips a narcissist of their power is by undermining the emotional leverage they depend on. Narcissists thrive on eliciting strong emotional reactions, whether it's admiration, fear, guilt, or anger, because these responses reinforce their sense of control. Your emotions, in effect, become the strings by which they manipulate you. As long as they can provoke a reaction, they maintain a psychological grip on you. But the moment you walk away and refuse to engage, you sever that connection. And for a narcissist who draws a sense of superiority from controlling others, this is nothing short of devastating. At the heart of narcissistic manipulation lies a fundamental truth. They cannot sustain their sense of self without external validation. And they achieve that validation not merely through praise, but through the ability to influence how others feel and respond. Every emotional outburst you have, every tear shed, every defensive explanation you offer, provides them with proof that they still hold sway over your mind. This is why they push your buttons with such precision. They know exactly which insecurities to exploit and which vulnerabilities to press. And yet, when you walk away calmly, decisively, and without giving them the emotional spectacle they crave, you disrupt this entire dynamic. You make their manipulative tactics ineffective. And nothing is more intolerable to a narcissist than losing that power. What makes this so threatening is that narcissists do not simply want to be liked or admired. They want to be in control. They want to dictate the terms of the relationship, to be the center around which everything else orbits. And the primary way they maintain this position is by keeping you emotionally entangled. They create situations designed to provoke you, sometimes through cruelty, sometimes through charm, but always with the same goal: to ensure that your emotional energy remains fixated on them. When you react, even in anger or frustration, you are still playing their game. But when you refuse to react, when you disengage and walk away, you deny them the emotional fuel they need to sustain their illusion of control. This is why your silence is so powerful. It is not simply the absence of words, it is the absence of the emotional feedback they require to maintain their dominance. When you no longer react to their provocations, when you do not defend yourself against their accusations or seek their approval, they are left with an unsettling reality. They no longer have access to the inner workings of your mind. And for a narcissist who depends on this access to reinforce their fragile sense of superiority, this is an existential threat. But there is another layer to this that is equally significant. By walking away and withholding your emotional energy, you force the narcissist to confront a truth they have spent their entire lives avoiding: that their power is an illusion. Their ability to manipulate only works if others participate in the game. And the moment you refuse to play, you reveal how hollow their control truly is. This realization is intolerable to them because it shatters the grandiose self-image they work so hard to project. Without your emotional investment, they are left with nothing but their own internal emptiness. And there is no manipulation clever enough to fill that void. And yet, for many people, the most challenging part of disengaging from a narcissist is overcoming the emotional conditioning they have experienced. Narcissists are masters at fostering dependency. They create an environment where your emotional responses become intertwined with their approval or disapproval. Over time, you may find yourself reacting reflexively, seeking their validation, fearing their rejection, or defending yourself against their distortions. This is not accidental. It is the product of deliberate psychological manipulation, and breaking free from this pattern requires an act of profound self-assertion. Walking away is not simply a physical departure. It is an emotional and psychological separation. It means reclaiming your autonomy. It means recognizing that your worth is not contingent on their approval. And perhaps most importantly, it means refusing to allow their manipulations to define how you see yourself. This is why it is so effective. Narcissists cannot control someone who no longer seeks their validation. They cannot manipulate someone who no longer reacts to their provocations. And they cannot maintain power over someone who recognizes their tactics for what they are: empty attempts to mask their own insecurity. And there's something else to consider here. When you walk away without emotional fanfare, without dramatic confrontation or defensive explanations, you deny the narcissist a key weapon: the ability to cast themselves as the victim. Narcissists are experts at turning the narrative to their advantage, portraying themselves as the aggrieved party while painting you as irrational, unstable, or cruel. But when you leave quietly and confidently, you give them nothing to weaponize. You exit on your terms with your dignity intact. And this, more than any argument or accusation, exposes the truth of the situation. It is important to understand that narcissists do not simply fear being abandoned. They fear being rendered powerless. And nothing strips them of their power more effectively than your refusal to be emotionally manipulated. When you walk away, you are making a statement that is both simple and profound. You do not control me. And in the face of that truth, all of their manipulative tactics lose their effectiveness. In the end, the most powerful move you can make against a narcissist is to take back control of your own mind and emotions. By walking away and refusing to engage, you do more than free yourself. You expose the fundamental weakness at the core of their power. And once you understand that their control depends entirely on your participation, you realize something even more profound. They never truly had power over you to begin with.